what I want to talk about is in times of trauma with children. I mean, I could do like a 4-day thing on just grief, right? Because there's so many layers to it. So what you've got is just the basic thing. But I just wanted to talk about visitation and funerals and stuff, because those are some of the questions that we always get from parents as children's people is, should I let my child go to the funeral, and will it be upsetting to the child or whatever? I think that, yes, children should go to the funeral. The more closure they get, the better. I just think that we're really bad at taking children to funerals and hospital rooms, because what we tend to do is we're horrified of what their reaction will be. And so we don't do it like anything else we do in our lives. We just drag them up there. And whenever I have groups, if we're doing it like a longer time where we can talk, I always say to people, what was your earliest memory of a funeral? And somebody always says, it was like my granny, and they dragged me up there by the hand, and I just remember she looked horrible, and I will never do that to a child. That person is always there in almost every group that I speak to. So when you do something traumatic with a child, like you're going to show them their granny or something who's on life support, or you're going to go to the visitation at the funeral or something like that, you just do it like you get into a pool. You don't take a child and just fling them into the cold water of a pool. You let them put their toe in, and then they put their foot in, and then they put their knee in, and then they just, dunk in. So just remember, if you ever are able to do this with a child, and you might give parents this tip as well, is that what you do is you just do it gradually. So let's say we're visiting Granny in the hospital, and you go in the hospital room first, and you notice what's happened to Granny here. She's got my grandchildren. I've turned 104 since I moved to Kentucky. I thought I was kind of young in Colorado, but then they're always like, Granny, we were talking about you, and we're really worried. I said, what are you worried about? Well, we're just worried that you're so old, you're going to die. And I said, well, honey, I'm going to try to live a couple more years. So when you take my grandchildren to see their old granny, so let's say that Granny's down there in a bed, and so you go in first and you notice things, or it's, you notice that there is, a bag with blood dripping or whatever it is, there's a thing. And you just tell them, before we go in there, I just want you to know there's like a television, but it's not to watch TV on. It goes beep, 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 and that's her heart. And you just do it like you would to the pool or the dentist or anything. And then you take them to the far away from Granny. And you just look, and you just say, what questions do you have? And then the child says, wow, that's a really big bed. Does it go up and down? And you go, yep, goes up and down. She have something in her hand? Yeah, she does. And then you just say, do you want to go closer? You ready to go closer? Now, some kids will say, I'm ready, go charging right in there. But most kids will be like, yeah. You go closer. And then you stop. And then you say, let's look. And then by the time they're in there, there's no trauma because you've done it gently. What messes kids up is just the dragging them in there, and then they're there, and they're like, what's happening? And the same with funerals, children don't know that funerals smell like flowers. And I didn't know that embalming fluid smells like flowers. So even though we don't really have that many flowers at funerals anymore, did you notice how they still smell like flowers? That's because it's, the embalming fluid. But so you have to say to the kids, it's going to smell like flowers. I mean, how often do you walk in a room and it smells like flowers? So for many people, that is like a big trigger to pass out in adult age because it takes them back to something in their childhood. So you just prepare them and you just say, they're in a casket or they're whatever. And then cremation, very scary for children. Because children, as much as we talk about the soul and the body, being separate, they really like our bodies. They think we're just fascinating. And they are very in their little bodies. And so where we can make ourselves feel better and think, well, the person was cremated and their soul wasn't there. A child says, how do you know? Like they burnt the person. But I just, I don't know how much you know about cremation, but really, it's not like it's heat, but really they just evaporate all the water out, which leaves the rest of it. So evaporation of the water in the body seems nicer to children than they put them in a fire and they burn to death. I mean, that just, no kid is like, whoa. So I just explained to them, and one of my goals in my life is to write a book about cremation, because there really aren't any if you've done a search for a cremation book. Like, I mean, and that just shows how scared everybody is of cremation, right? And we've all seen, enough horror movies about stuff that, whoa. So anyway, so I just say to them, it's so hot that, how you have blood and that's liquid and everything's liquid and all the energy. Well, God takes the energy out, that's the soul, and then all that's left is the fluid and the body. And so when all the fluids, evaporates, then what's left are these ashes. And they go like, oh, okay. So, I don't know if a funeral director would be like, oh, that's exactly what happens. But I mean, I went to a crematorium and there was not a body burning. It was like a thing, and it's super hot in there. So it also makes me feel better when I die, that the flames won't be like shooting up through me, right? So kids get real magical thinking about this. And you're talking to somebody who, by the way, couldn't put my Barbie dolls away because they couldn't breathe if I put them in the Barbie case. So I had some issues around this myself. I think it makes me super worried about what happens when people die. Like, what if you're the person that, is actually alive? So I have my own issues around that. But with children, you just do it very gently, and you answer them as honestly as you can. Parents always say, I don't want to upset them. And again, just get a piece of paper and draw that U and show them this is really what your child needs to go through. The visitation is its own little U, right? The funeral is its own little U. And one of the kindest things you can do for parents is to show up and to be present at the times when the family is gathering, when during that long line. The nicest thing you can do is bring some Oreos and a little, water or something, and give it to the kid, because it says to them, I get that you're here. Bring a little 4 M&Ms in a baggie goes a long way. Another thing I do with children is I carry these little bags of comfort. And they're just, those wedding bags, when you go to a wedding or something and you get that little drawstring bag, it's see-through-y and you get M&Ms in it or whatever. You put things in there that kids love, like a beautiful diamond, jewel. Not a real one, of course, but they always say, is this real? You put a little fluffy thing. You put a little special rock that you find out on a hike that looks like a heart. You just throw stuff in there. A little Hershey Kiss goes a long way, an M&M. And then you say to the kid, this is a bag of comfort. I knew you'd be hurting. And adults go like, well, what does each of these items mean? They don't mean anything. They mean comfort. Just give it to a kid and trust me, they'll love it. So they open the bag and they go, oh, comfort. She gave me, a stone that looks like a heart? Oh my gosh. And don't think that your teenagers aren't into that. Have you been to a teenager's room? They got all these little bags of stuff and their little, you just throw, we had a grief camp, and one of my friends, Jerome, went up there and he threw heart-shaped glitter everywhere. And he said, tell the kids I left them a surprise. And when we got there, somebody said, is this our surprise? And they literally picked up heart-shaped glitter and put it in little bags for days and just loved that. And nobody said to them, the heart-shaped glitter means comfort from Jerome. I just said, Jerome left you a surprise. And they picked it up. So remember, kids, they're all symbolic. So it doesn't have to be this equals that, this equals that. You just say, here, I just wanted to bring you some comfort. And they get the little fuzzy out and they go, oh, it's comfort. See? So don't project your need for instructions on a child. They don't need instructions. They're all good. I used to take at the center, I used to take my teenagers out for French fries. Or I'd run over, I worked right by Carl's Jr.'s, and I'd go get his French fries. And then one day I had this big old football player. He was sitting at my children's table. His knees were like up over his head because, he was sitting so low in his chair. And he said, I heard my brother got cookies. And I said, well, they get homemade cookies, but like, since you're a cool teenager, you get French fries. And he said, I like homemade cookies. And it just dawned on me, there's also like a little regression that happens in times of pain. So things that like a teenager might not want, like a little bag of comfort, they do want. Of course, just put extra Hershey Kisses and stuff in theirs. But so, yeah, don't be intimidated by your teenagers. They're just big kids that try to act cool. And they're intimidating because there's nothing like a big teenager being like, boo. It kind of gets intimidating when they do that attitude, but you just barrel through it. You're like, I'm here to help you. I don't care. So, all right. So I wanted to show you this little book that we wrote, and if I could borrow your book, you are a winner of the book. When I first started First Steps, I had a friend named Robin, and when I first started First Steps, I do nothing quickly, and I had this idea for First Steps, but I got a group of my girlfriends together to pray for a year before I started it because I was too scared. You would think I'm bold. You have no idea. I'm like a sick woman who is scared of everything. But if I pray and if I feel like God called me to do it, then I will do it. So once I overcome the whole, like, God told me to do this thing, I'm bold. But until that, I'm very timid. And so I was scared to start First Steps because nobody knew what it was, and I thought they'd think I was crazy. So anyway, my friend Robin and Paula and Emily and I prayed for a year. We'd met once a week, and we prayed about what First Steps would look like, and then we started. And Robin, unbeknownst to us when we started praying, had leukemia. And she died of leukemia in the first week that First Steps opened. So we got our 501c3, and she died that week. And the first child that I dealt with was her son, Rex. And he was 7, and he wanted to scatter her ashes at the thing. And anyway, and we did. But I thought at the funeral, there were so many children. She was one of our Sunday school teachers, and I thought I'd really like to do a story, a children's time during the funeral. So this was my children's time that I did for Rex, and that was, 14 years ago, 20, whatever it was. And anyway, but I've always loved this little story, and I've always taught it. And then we had a volunteer named Nora Michelli. Have any of you ever heard of Joseph Michelli? He wrote The Starbucks Experience. Well, anyway, that's the book I wanted Touching Heaven to be. That guy is, like, loaded. He wrote The Starbucks Experience and all this stuff. Anyway, he's Nora's husband. And anyway, Nora was her own person, and she loved children so much, and she was my number one helper. She's in a lot of these slides that I have, a lot of pictures of her. Anyway, when she died, Sonny's Barbecue, Joseph is a consultant with them, and he consults with all these places. And they came and they said, we want to do something for Nora Michelli, but we don't want it to be just go to supplies or whatever. And so we had these books made. So we paid to have the books made. And then they give them away. And I think that now they're going to sell them, the First Steps. But I gave First Steps away to this church at Highlands Ranch. And so it's St. Luke's, Highlands Ranch. And if you want this book, you buy it through them. And I think it's going to be available on Amazon as soon as they get it together. I mean, it switched over a year, but I don't know what they're doing. So I'm going back there in September. I'll get this all straightened out. So anyway, it's called The Golden Cord, A Gentle Way to Explain Death to Children. And I wrote it, and then my friend Leah Foster from 4th grade did the cutout pictures. So I'll just show you this little. It's very simplistic, but children like it. I have to get through all the dedications to Nora. Did you know that God made people in a very special way? God made each of us with a body and a soul. Your body is the outside of you, and the soul is the part of you that isn't your body, the real you. And I don't know if you can see well, but there's this little soul always with the teddy bear. While we live on earth, our body and our soul are together, and we're connected to God's loving heart by a beautiful golden cord. By the way, the cord is so strong that it can never be broken. We're never far from God's loving heart. When we pray, we send our prayer up the golden cord. Now you run your finger up the golden cord and see how it connects you to God. When God speaks to us or sends us love, God sends it down the golden cord. Run your finger down the golden cord. See how we're connected to God? Always. When we die, our body stays here and it's buried or it's cremated. It's different with our soul. Our body stays here on earth, but our soul simply slides up the golden cord and into the heart of God. And then we don't need the cord anymore because we're with God. We're in a place where there is love and peace. We are with God in heaven. Remember, this is not the end, the golden cord. And then we tape a little golden cord here and we tie it on their little hand. And we say to them, when you're afraid, just remember that your loved one is safe with God. And then there's a little page where they can remember their loved one, and they do their little thing. So that's my little golden cord book, and children have really loved it. And you know who's loved it? Older people that are afraid to die. And you know, some theologians get on me and they say, well, that's really making the body and soul separate and blah, 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 blah. But you know, for children, it's just really spooky. Like, where is my mommy? Where is my granny? Where is her body? And you really do have to separate those out. I mean, I don't understand how the body and soul work either, but so I love this little book. And so we've given out a lot of golden cords to children. But anyway, it's the Center for Spiritual Engagement. That's what it is, and it's at St. Luke's. So I have a little girl. Her dad died. Anyway, she came and she drew this, and she had, oh, there she is. There you have it. And this was on a big whiteboard. As you can see, it was a really dirty one. And the interesting thing is that she's in the center. That's her. And she drew a cord to her daddy. And she was a real daddy's girl. Like, the mother, admittedly, does not love being a mother, did not want to be a mother. Married this guy, you know, got pregnant, had a baby. But he was pretty much like, he stayed home with her. He was the main caregiver of her and everything. And he died, oh gosh, it was traumatic, at the Grand Canyon. His horse slipped. And so she witnessed it. It was bad. And anyway, she was little, and she's in the middle. But so her mother, and she had a real hard time connecting because the mother had not been, you know, when you're in crisis, you want the parent that took care of you the most, obviously. And so she was almost, and then she was taking out her anger on her mom or whatever. But anyway, she drew this golden cord to her daddy, and then she sat there for a few minutes, and then she drew a golden cord, and that's her mother. And her mother just bawled because she knew that her child really was connected to her. And that was like a huge breakthrough where the mother finally felt like, I can do this. And the child said, I can do this. So it connected them. So I just thought that was a beautiful offshoot of the book, and I just love it. So that's their work. Uh-huh. Yeah, it's funny, you know, children, it's cute. They're always the center of their picture. I love that. Yeah, they're always the center. It's hilarious. They start with themselves and work out, where we always start with somebody else because we don't look snotty. I love that kids just start right in the middle. I'm the center of my universe. All right, so here is all my contact information. I saw y'all writing it down. My website is leanne-hadley.com. My boys recently told me that I'm a nerd if I put www. You don't have to put that anymore, so I don't want to be a nerd. Now I'm leanne-hadley.com, but that's a website because I still need the HTTPS. And then leannehadley@me.com. I know it's all about me. It's just I didn't know how to set up my iCloud, and it did it for me. And then my Facebook page, you're welcome to be my Facebook friend on Leanne Hadley, and you can see my grandchildren and blah, blah, blah. But if you want to be on my professional page, then you go to Leanne Cares About Kids and like it, and then you get little updates. I don't put something on there that much, but I try to make it thoughtful and not goofy. And I don't put any political things for those of you who are already worn out for the 2016 election. And then at Leanne Hadley is my Twitter. I was just thinking about Lynn Sweet when I did that, because when Twitter first came out, I'm the only person I know that has my actual name for Twitter. And I remember Lynn Sweet calling me and saying, hey, go get your Twitter name. And I said, for what? What's Twitter? And he said, just get a name. And I did, and then I didn't use it for like 30 years. So anyway, that's how. Are there dots after the F&B? Oh, it was just like, that's my Facebook page. So it's just Leanne Cares About Kids, end of it, but that's my Facebook page. So if you go on Facebook and you put Leanne Cares About Kids and like my page, that's how you get to that. And I love to hear from people. I love it, I love it, I love it. I don't usually give out my phone number only because you cannot catch me. I'm a moving target. But email, I love to hear from you. I love to hear questions. I love for you to follow up with stuff. I love to answer questions. I never tire of talking about children and helping people to do it better in their settings. So you will never get on my nerves. I mean, you might not hear back from me for a couple days, but you will never bother me. I guarantee it. Never. So any question that you have, any comment, whatever, please send them to me. I love to hear from people. Even criticism I take. I don't love it, but I listen to you. Try not to send ugly things. It hurts my feelings. Okay. All right. What questions do you all have, or comments, or what are you thinking? You got the slide, so now you have the little U shape. Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to ask, your model, have you ever tried this on adults? We were having a discussion at the table at lunch about whether or not that might work with older adults too. Have you had any experience with that?
You know, I have not done it with adults. Well, I mean, I have in my own, Bible study and stuff like that. Really, everything I do, we had a contemplative worship service and it followed the U. So we were like, what songs take us into that? If you notice, this is the pattern of worship too. Worship ideally is you come in happy, right? And then you do your opening hymn, then you confess your sins, then the word becomes flesh, then you do the final hymn and you go out in a blessing. So this is also worship, follows this pattern. But I have had lots of people take my trainings and take it back to nursing homes, take it into the prisons. It just is used kind of everywhere. And they have had great success. And with older people, one of the things is especially nursing home visits, it's pitiful. I always find it so pitiful when I go into the nursing home and that person who I had been to their beautiful big house is now pared down their items to 20 things sitting in that little hospital room. It always breaks my heart. But you talk about symbolic language. That's their life. Everything in their room means something. So you can do it formally, like people have gone in and used the rocks. Our Stephen ministers used holy listening stones with all of their Stephen ministry people. Our home visitors use holy listening stones from First United Methodist. But just even being aware of it changes the way you relate to people. So whenever I do a hospital call, I look around the room and say, what is this? Who did your flowers come from or whatever? And it's all symbolic language. It just opens the door to go deep with them. So I use this you always. But it has been used formally in a lot of places. The prisoners, they have like a deck of cards because they can't obviously take rocks into the prison. That probably wouldn't be allowed. But they have like a deck of cards that they use in a lot of prison ministries now because of that. So it does get used. Here's the thing, Jesus said, unless you become like children, you will never enter the kingdom. We thought that was cute. We thought it was syrupy sweet. But where that really resonates in my soul is that since I've worked with children, I think he meant it. Like when we figure out how to help children heal, we've helped the whole body. It really is that trickle up thing. So, for example, preaching and everything, I just credit the children for all of that. Because if you can tell a Bible story to a child and captivate them, then you can captivate adults with the same thing. We're really not that different. A soul is a soul. Grief is grief. Happiness is happiness. We don't feel differently just because we're little or big or old or young or whatever. And I'm so kooky, I don't even believe souls have ages. So I think that if this works with a child in spiritual formation, it'll work with everybody because I don't think our souls age. I think we are our being, and then our body just keeps us, humble or whatever. What's so simple about it is that it really does just follow Jesus. And, we've made religion very complex with our theologies. And I love theology. Like, I'm a total dork. I read, I get on these kicks. I mean, Dietrich Bonhoeffer was like my love for 2 years. I read everything that the man wrote. I mean, I like head trippy, like heavy theology. But I think that Jesus, even if you think about that symbolic language, he gave us a very powerful symbol, life, death, resurrection. And I think that we make things very complicated talking about them. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I just think that sometimes we need to go back to the basics and remember what it is. And so then you can start layering this over everything that you do. And a lot of times for us, when we would say, something's not effective, I went to my nephew killed himself, and I had been working with suicidal kids, and I went to their support group, and it was horrifying to me because people were still in the support group after 14 years. And I thought, oh my gosh, people never heal from suicide. But I'm not critical of that group at all, but what I'm saying is, if something, really healing should come out of our work, right? Transformation should come out of our work. And I think so many times, y'all have this, can I erase this? Just Google Leanne, I pop up pretty quickly. Okay. But So what we tend to do is we've learned, because everybody wants to stay in the top third of the U. So if this is a U and everybody wants to stay up here, and everybody wants to hop over here from event, people want to do that instead of this, right? So a lot of times what we think of as transformative or whatever is just bigger, louder, more amazing. So like with children, rather than go into those silent spaces, we tend to add puppets and, balloons and, craziness, like bring an elephant in, whatever. I did bring a camel into our church. It's pretty fun. But it really, I think this is where we need to go. And this can be as fun as you want, but you just have to make sure that it always goes here. So for example, if worship is boring to people, it's probably because we're just doing wah, 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 or whoa, whoa, heavy, heavy, heavy. Because what's transformative is when worship goes through this pattern. It's transformative when your lesson goes through this pattern. It's transformative. And if you look at your best things, like you're looking at that thing and you say, I really like Grief Share, probably it's because it does this model. And I'm not saying that because I identified this model. I'm saying Jesus did it, like life, death, resurrection. Every Bible story practically follows this model, right? So my kids love Jonah. Jonah, belly of the whale, out to save the people. No, every Bible story, this is the shape of, it's just what Jesus gave us as the shape. It's how things work. Garden of Eden, fall, they get forgiven. It just goes on and on and on. So I think when you get stuck somewhere or you say, I don't know the effectiveness, a lot of times if you just draw a U over it, you'll be able to diagnose. It's almost like taking the temperature of it and say, oh, this is why this isn't working. We're just going ding, 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 ding. And you'll know what to add that'll take it into that deep space. And again, let's say you're doing, I'm getting off topic here, but let's say you're doing Bible school or whatever. Okay, if your Bible school is all this, it's not going to be transformative. So you have to just add those spaces, but it doesn't mean that you then take Bible school down to contemplative worship. You make sure your Bible school looks like this. And each day gets deeper and deeper, right? And then you really see the kids start being spiritually transformed. So it's just like a temperature taker. All right, what else? Back to your question, I just will say one thing. I've had a lot of therapists use this model too. And one of the things that they love are the holy listening stones. Because with traumatized people, they've learned that those of us that saw 9/11, and then we saw it over and over and over. They've shown the people that had the most stress from watching that on television were the ones that saw it 400 times. And that those people that turned off the television were less affected. And it's the same with trauma. It used to be tell me about let's say you were someone who was sexually molested. Tell me about that over and over and over. And what they've discovered is that maybe we are re-injuring people. Because again, it's that thing about the imagination. Even adults do that, where when you imagine it, you're reliving it. So you go over and over and over the same thing. And so some of the therapists, there's a guy in Washington that uses this a lot, and his last name is Richards. I can't remember his first name. But he said that with his, he works with sexually molested women, and they hold a stone until they can get in touch with the feeling. So again, you bypass tell me the events of it, and you go right to the feeling level. And he has found that to be extremely helpful for women that could not even articulate anything. And he said his first few sessions, they're just sitting there holding rocks. They're not saying anything. I had an autistic child that came to the center, and he was very, very autistic. And, his mother said, do you see autistic children? I said, I don't know. Yeah, sure, And then I met him, and I just saw him so his mother could have a 45-minute break. It was just mercy. I didn't think it mattered. He'd go all over my office, picking up this stone, moving it here, taking this stone, setting it on the ground, getting a crayon, putting it in with the stones, getting and I was just like, I'm just going to watch this kid do his thing and give his mother a break. And then I'd go out and she'd say, how did he do? And I'd say, he did great. He did great. She says, did he let you bless him? No, he doesn't let me touch him, Eventually he let me bless him. Then I get a call from his school teacher. Or his mother calls me and says, his teacher would like to talk to you. And okay. So I get on the phone and she says, what are you doing with Jamie, whatever his name was? And I said, did he say I'm a therapist? I'm just a holy support provider? I don't know what. And she said, he's so much calmer in class. I was just wondering if you could teach me some of the things that you're doing with him. And what I was doing was letting him express himself symbolically, but I didn't have a clue what that kid was talking about, right? It just looked like nonsense to me, but he got better. And then his therapist wanted to talk to me, and then they all have holy listening stones in their offices. And see, again, it's that power of understanding that symbolism. And when you do this with adults, again, those symbols are so important. That's why we wear our jewelry. That's why we choose what we choose. I mean, we are symbolic people. And Nike knows that. Nike puts that swoosh on everything, right? McDonald's knows it, How many times you're going down the street, oh, that big P for Panera Bread, we're all there. We are symbolic people. So again, once you understand this, it just goes whoosh out in everything, I think. My friends are actually, one of my friends saw on, I think, Good Morning America or something, they did when people are the happiest, and it's like when you're children and when you're super old, and then in the middle you dip, in your 40s or whatever, and he's like, oh my gosh, the U is on Good Morning America. So I was like, what are you talking about? So we've kind of turned in, I think there's a movie where they just keep seeing the number 9 or something, that my friends, the people that have been my peeps for a long time, all we see is U's. We're like, the U shape. My girlfriend just broke up with her boyfriend. I was like, he couldn't go to the bottom of his U. It's just our whole language. So everybody, we all talk in U. Where are you at on your U? Okay, so it becomes a little bit infectious. But it's just, I think the simplicity of it makes it so user-friendly. And that's why you can take this and teach it. Because you understand this. It's not rocket science. So, of course, you can teach us. We can duplicate this. We could use this worldwide. Because, it's an illustration. It's not a theory. And I'm sure there's, I could write, I wrote a whole dissertation on it. It's 300 pages. But do you need that? Or do you see that thing you have? You see that thing you have? All right. Anything else? So you're going to mull this. Then you're going to go back to your churches and be like, oh, I don't know what to do. And then you're going to send me an email. I'm going to help you. It's easy. The other thing that we become then, as we understand the you, are people that listen to the deepest parts of the you. Everywhere. We've been talking about hurt today, that the core statement is hurt. But people become authentic all the time. Children do it regularly, right? They say the funniest things in children's time, and they're just delightful. And, what we tend to do, though, when it gets holy, and we have so many preconceived notions about children. I do a whole talk on what happened, how we ended up being very secular in our approach to children's spirituality rather than spiritual. It all goes back to Plato and stuff. But anyway, what we want to be are people that listen for this and just pause and honor that rather than push them back up here. So, lots of times children will say things like, we were talking last night at dinner at some weird things that have happened or whatever. But my son, when he was little, until he was 4, he would say to me, Mommy, remember how when the first time I saw you and your face was so pretty, but always before that I had only seen you from far away. But then when I got to see your face close up, remember how pretty you were? And I would be like, oh. Now, some of my friends wanted to engage with him in a discussion about how he'd never seen me before he was in the womb, but he was saying something. I don't know what he was saying. I don't know where he was. Was he hearing my voice in the womb? Did he live in heaven with God and then he got placed in my womb? I don't know. But I always just treasured that, And I think in children's time, they say the sweetest things, whatever. And I wish that we wouldn't laugh. I wish we'd pause and listen, because a lot of times what they're saying is great, and we miss it because we get nervous or because it's out of the thing. And whenever people go, you watch this, whenever people go below this upper third, a child, an adult, whatever, our anxiety goes up. And really, we are the ones that should meet people down here and be listening for that. So there's just this awareness that when somebody tells you something or when somebody's wearing something that, I always say to people, is this special, this necklace or something? And probably 99% of the time somebody will say, it is. My daughter got it for me. My son was in Africa or is in Africa. And again, it's just like, how do we listen deeply? I think that's what we're called to do, is to be deep listeners. This is in hurts, but we could do it in everything. And imagine the world if you really felt like you were heard. Imagine if church was the place that you went not because it was the right thing to do or the intellectual place to go, but the place where you were heard. Imagine how many people would flock to churches because we don't have those spaces where we're heard and we're honored as the people we are. So I'm glad you brought that up. And Yeah, we need to be present and deep. And you know, sitcoms haven't done us any favor either because everybody's funny. So somebody says something and then you got to make a joke about it. And that is well-intentioned, but it's as hurtful as, you know, telling someone to shut up if you take something that they do. My son, that's the last kid story I'll tell you, but my son, Britton, he's a nervous little thing. He's always been a thrower-upper. So even when he was little, when he'd go to like football for the first day, he'd throw up. Or, you know, birthday parties, he'd come home and puke up his cake. He had a really fun time, but he's just a vomiter, you know, one of those kids. It's great, too, because believe me, I know how to scrub a car clean. But he was always a little vomiter. Well, when he was in high school, he had this girlfriend, and she broke his heart. And he was vomiting every morning out of stress. And so finally, you know, I thought, Britton, we got to do something about this, honey. You cannot throw up every morning that you have to go to school and perhaps run into your girlfriend. And so I took him to the doctor to just see if there was, you know, like, I don't know, like some Finagrin or something. And he'd been to a therapist or whatever. And they were like, well, he's just puking. That's just how he gets feeling it. And we went to the doctor, and I couldn't hardly get him to the doctor. You know, it took forever to get him because he's like big, and what are you going to do, punch him in the face and knock him out or something? I mean, if they're 16, they don't want to go to the doctor. They don't want to go to the doctor. And I finally got him in the doctor, and he went in and he said to the nurse, she said, what are your presenting issues? And he says, well, you know, I vomit every morning. And she says, are you pregnant? And he was like, so then the doctor came in, and guess who shut down? And then I said, he vomits every morning. And what did the doctor say? Are you pregnant? Which seemed cute. But again, it's like that sensitivity, right? And so ever since that, I've always been, you know, like I think, oh. And, you know, when you do the silent space, like after the thing, there's always the joker. There's always the joking kid. There's always the joking person, whatever. And that doesn't mean that kid is not into this. It means that kid is probably way into it because that's why they're having to break the tension with something, you know. So just don't be fooled and just stay, but try to be a listener, a deep listener. And I know you are because you're listening to each other, and I saw how you did those stones, and you know, you already have these gifts. I'm just telling you don't you have that sense that I'm already telling you what you already knew?